What are some of the most common B2B objections that you face? As a sales rep, I'm sure you've probably come across many of them. In this episode today, my guest Nadia Rashid is going to talk to us about how we can overcome a lot of those common B2B objections and a secret strategy that you should be paying attention to. Listen up for it. You're going to love this episode. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast here on TSC TV on YouTube. I'm your host, Donald Kelly, the Sales Evangelist, and I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, as you know, we've been featuring some of the top, most successful women in sales, obviously in recognition of Women History Month. And some of these women are doing, all these women are doing amazing things, and we want to make sure we recognize them. And also, if you know women in your life, someone that's doing amazing in sales, tell them about this podcast. Also, make sure you recognize them. Do a shout out on LinkedIn and feature them. Tell them, let the world know about some of these folks who are doing some amazing things in the industry. And today, the one and only Rashid, my guest today, like Nadia Rashid, is going to be like just dropping some great stuff. In this conversation, when I had it with her, we were talking about the idea of overcoming objections. No matter where you are in your sales journey, no matter what level of experience you have, like you're going to come across objection. And actually, in the conversation, I want to make sure you connect with her on LinkedIn because she is super active and is super awesome. So I want you to check it out. I'm going to put a link down in this video as well as in the if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, where you can click on her LinkedIn link and connect with her. She is the Senior Vice President of Sales at Seismic, and Seismic is a fantastic organization. Our good friend Dewan is also one of the representatives from Seismic that's been on our show as well. So, but as Nadia gives her experience, as she shares some of these things, you'll hear what she teaches, this 4-step process, as well as this idea of the trick that she says is the key, or so to speak, when it comes towards overcoming objection. I won't give it away. You're going to have to listen for it. Anyways, let's go ahead and dive into the episode. Nadia, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate having you.
Donald, I'm excited to be here. You're a legend in this space, so I'm glad that we could connect.
Well, let's see if I can deliver on that. But this topic today is something I'm passionate about. I'm a big believer in that you're overcoming the objection is important, and I think it goes hand in hand with sales. I mentioned this on a past episode the other day that your objection is kind of like objection and sales are like peas and carrot. You find them no matter where you're going to go because you're inspiring people or in motivating people to make a change. And sometimes we're stuck in our ways. But I want to talk about some of those most common sales objection, or how to come up with the most common sales objections in B2B sales. But before we dive into that, why don't you tell people a little bit more about you and what you do, Nadia?
Awesome. So I'm the SVP of Sales for the East Coast here at Seismic. So I manage all the teams from like commercial, mid-market, all the way through enterprise and global. Have a good gang here. I think most people are familiar with Seismic. We're the leader in the sales enablement space. Prior to this, I've been here roughly 2 years, but I was at Marketo, did something very similar and ran their East Coast hub there and was there for roughly 5 years.
Oh, sweet. Congratulations on that. You can tell. I remember when I first heard about Marketo, I was in entering the software SaaS world, and I'm like, man, there needs to be something better to be able to do marketing.
There you had it.
And somebody was like,
that industry.
Well, you should you should check out Marketo. And I was like, dang it, that's good. They solved the problem. So great job. Well, let's dive in and talk about objections. How would you define objection from your perspective? Let's just go basic before we even go into how to overcome them.
Yeah. I define it as it's an obstacle, right? It's some sort of concern that the prospective buyer has conveyed, right? Sometimes it's pretty direct. Sometimes it's through, illicit words here and there, but it's just a concern that they have that the salesperson ultimately needs to overcome.
Great. So what are your views on objections? And everybody has their different feelings on them.
I think that's in any part of life, sales specifically, you're going to have them, right? I think it's almost needed. I think if a prospect does not present any objections, it almost gives you, hold on, do I have happy ears? Is something else going on? Are they an experienced buyer? Have they done their due diligence? Have they procured software in the past? And so I think objections are good because it allows the buyer to do a clear assessment of what's in the market. And I think it's one of the clear differentiators of a good salesperson and a great salesperson is how you actually react when you're experienced and when you get these objections thrown at you.
Yeah, and I think you bring up several points there that I just find fascinating. The first one is the if a buyer is not asking objection, it's like when you hear that I live in Florida, and you get those hurricanes that come through, and sometimes that calm before the storm, and you're like, oh man, this is great, it's a beautiful day. Yeah, you're in the eye of the storm. You wait like about 30 minutes, and then a disaster is going to happen. And I think sometimes that happens with buyers. If a buyer is not asking some questions or not getting anything clarified, something is missing. And I know that I did this as a new seller when I was young and I was trying to figure out what to do. I was like, oh man, this is great, man. These people are going to buy. And then all of a sudden I put this stuff in my pipeline, and then my manager is like, okay, where's it at? You said it was going to close. This came up.
Yeah.
This came up.
Yeah, very common, right? With happy ears, new seller. And when that happens, I often ask, like, why are we not going to win this deal? Or why would this deal not happen? Because as you know, there are so many objections, and we'll talk about it, of course, but everything from like price to, functionality, partnership, budget, all those great things. But if those don't come up and a rep is committing those deals, not to say it doesn't happen, but it's very, very, very few in terms of what I've seen. So
yeah. And yeah, in my experience as well, there's something is going to be there. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day, Nadia, and one of the things they said was like, if you're a seasoned veteran, if you're a seasoned sales rep, you've been on a path before. So you kind of know some of those barriers or some of those challenges. It behooves you, because I can tell you one of the reasons why I was afraid was I didn't want to agitate the nest, so to speak. If something is going good, don't mess it up. So I was like, oh man, Nadia didn't bring up any objection. I mean, this deal is going to close. But if you're an experienced seller, you know those things are going to come up, and you have the maturity to ask, because I was concerned that if I did that, you probably would get mad at me, or you probably will, I will probably mess up the deal. And it was just worrying about things that could go wrong when, it wasn't the case. I was thinking for you, and that's a bad thing as a sales rep.
yeah, I think that's natural for sure. One of the techniques that I try to have some of the reps do is ensure that in every call, are there any concerns? Is there any reason why we shouldn't move forward to the next step? Even just an open-ended questions, even if they haven't explicitly said there's something, almost lead them down the path. I want to make sure there's 100% buy-in and there's something very mutual here, right? It's like, I don't want to be left at the altar. I want to make sure all through this relationship, we're good and there's no surprises.
Yeah. You started to bring up some of the common ones that you hear in your industry when it comes to objections. What are some of those?
Yeah. And I categorize objections in a couple of areas, right? You have top of the funnel where hopefully, the reps are doing some outbound as well. And so that's everything from, status quo is fine. We use a competitor. So on the prospecting side, there's a lot of objections. On the actual sales cycle, everything from, we don't have budget, or we don't have enough resources, or the cost justification is invalidated, or we have competing priorities, right? I think in every scenario, there are so many different ones, and depending as you're going through the process, it gets more and more complicated, and you get more and more objections.
And I agree with you on that too. There was something that I read from Gong, and I want to throw this out there. The interesting idea here is that, keep calm and take a breath. It's what successful reps do upon getting objections. And we measured the average length that, star reps pause, and they saw that they paused a lot compared to people who were beginners. They just don't pause. They feel that they have to ramble onto the prospect. Talk to me about that. Is that something you've experienced, you've seen?
Yeah. And I personally, when I was in a seller's shoes, would do something similar, right? Just 5 seconds of awkward silence is so uncomfortable. And sometimes if you just pause, whether it's in person or, via Zoom, it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But what it does is it allows the prospect to gather their thoughts. Like, simple things like you're going over pricing, just pause. It's natural for a rep to say, well, we can provide discounts or blah, 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 and just fill the air, fill the space. But their response may be, hey, this looks great. This is right in line with what we had budgeted. Or we want to add more users, and they may volunteer some information. And so I absolutely agree that the best sellers have these not long, they seem long, right, when you first start this exercise, but they have that. And I think you do that with everything, whether it's the objection handling, whether it's, reviewing information, feedback. It's just long pauses here and there.
I was trying to practice it.
I saw that. I was like, I'm getting awkward. Yeah.
No, but it's so true. But like, I think we feel that there's so much need for a speed, and I think we've been taught this disadvantage, this service for years, that the best sales rep have the gift of gab. And I'm grateful for folks like Daniel Pink, who kind of introduced the idea of the introvert, the ambivert. Like some of the best sellers in the world are not extroverts, or they're not necessarily shy, but they know how to shut up. They know how to listen. And I think the point of what you shared there, that people will divulge, or they'll probably convey or share more when that pause happens, because it's not natural. We all don't like to do that pause. But if I'm a buyer and I hear that, like, that phone should have been turned off, Donald. But when I hear that pause, it's like, okay, they expect me to say something. So then it prompts me to open my mouth and to share more. And I think in a natural way, as a buyer, I might share more than I probably wouldn't have.
Sure. No, I think those are all very valid points.
How do you train your team to do that, though? Because you're sitting here, we talk about it, we tell them, but then if you and I were to listen to the calls of our sales reps, we will probably hear them not doing it. How I can tell them to do it. Some sales reps are listening to this. What can we do as a practice to not enforce, but to encourage them to do this?
Sure. I always tell people over certain periods, right, make sure you practice the 5-second rule. And it's something you have to be mindful of. And so when we go back and, like you mentioned, like gong calls, and we go and listen and we ask the rep to self-assess, we say there are certain points where you should just allow for that time. So give yourself 5 seconds, pause. We know it's uncomfortable. In the beginning, you're going to get a lot of responses, but it's just something that you need to be cognizant of. And a lot of times we ask them to go and listen to other top reps, because what they'll find out is they do two things really, really well. First is listen, right? Actively listen. And then the second is actually asking a lot of open-ended questions to learn more, to understand, validate, all that good stuff. And so I think it's just something that you have to be mindful of. I've had one rep who talked a lot. This is a couple of gigs ago. She used to actually have her timer out on her phone so she could see how long, right? And I would say, give it 2 seconds, give it 3 seconds, because you're speaking so frequently where you're sometimes even speaking over the prospect. And at that point, it was a virtual type of sell. It was very transactional, so it was never in person. And she wasn't able to read cues, and she kept stepping on their toes. And I said, it's really, you need to be mindful of it. Put your clock on your phone. After you say a sentence, pause for 3 or 4 seconds, and then go to your next point. It's okay if there's nothing that they want to add. Just make sure you do that.
Yeah. And I think it gives you, like, I'm glad she used that phone. So if you're listening to this episode, everybody has one of those. Mine just went off. But make sure you time yourself and to take advantage of it. And I also like this idea. One thought that came to mind as you were sharing that, I think it gives you, especially when it comes to the objection, it gives you the opportunity to think cognitively, like to just really, if you ask me a genuine question and I'm taking that time to pause and I'm thinking, it shows that I'm not just like BS blowing off like something, like some kind of thing that I got from marketing. Like, this is the reason why, because of blah, 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 blah. It's me giving real thought to it. And I think buyers would appreciate that more because it comes from one, you're genuine, and two, it seems like it's more consultative, somebody that actually knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, what I always tell reps is when there's an objection, think about it as like this 4-step process, whether you're, like I use the analogy, like if you're dating someone or, for example, you're going to the doctor, right? The first thing is, like, you have to ensure that you're listening. So if you go to a doctor, you essentially want to feel like you're being heard, right? I broke my arm, or, I'm having pain in this specific place. And then the second is, you want that person to like understand what you're saying, validate. So you're telling me it hurts here specifically, right? And then before you you actually go and respond to the objection. Make sure you do those two things. So then people feel like they've been heard. That's a very important factor. And so that third step is respond. And it's okay. Some reps feel like they have to bullshit their way through, right? It's if you don't know the answer, it's okay to say, hey, Sally, I understand that budget is a concern of yours. I hear that there's nothing budgeted for the next 2 quarters. If you would allow me to go work with my VP to do X, Y, and Z, it's okay if you don't know the answer. But lastly is once you do address that objection, make sure you confirm that you've resolved that. Sometimes we think we've resolved it, or we threw a statement out there and they understand that, but just say, did that help overcome your concern you had? And get that validation regardless of what it is.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's one of the other things I saw from Gong where they talked about that validation, or the, I say it all the time. Does that make sense? And I was like, sometimes friends are like, stop asking me that. Does that make sense? And I thought it was like annoying for a second. I was going to stop it, but then Gong's study proved it. It said, no, the top reps usually use something to that nature. Either does it make sense, or to validate, is that clear, or something to that nature. And I think that's a critical piece. Don't move on to something else because you just need to get through the demo when the buyer is still back here. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's really, really big because I'll use a common one, right? We do a lot of IT calls to get the validation of whether it's integration or whatever it may be. And people are like, nope, I checked the box. We did the technical call with their tech team. And I'm like, are they comfortable? And they're like, I think so. Yeah, we went through all the steps. I'm like, did you ask them? Do I have your buy-in? Are you signing off? Are you comfortable here? And that's really important, is just that validation part.
Oh, so true. How do you ensure, though, you don't turn your objection or your response into debates? I think sometimes sales reps can fall into that, where you get defensive or a buyer, and it can turn into one of those ugly tension. How do we ensure that doesn't happen? Or is that a bad thing?
I typically think that debate is never good, right? Having open dialogue is definitely much more collaborative and better received. So again, right, if you're listening, it's coming from a place of concern, right? So if a family member came to you and said, I'm experiencing, headaches and I can't concentrate or whatever it is, you're just not going to be dismissive or get angry at them, right? Like, selling is a relationship. You have to care about what it is that you're solving for the prospect, how it's going to impact them if they're your champion and they're trying to actually move this along. And if there's a concern there, you shouldn't blow up or anything like that. I think the scenario you mentioned, which I have seen a few times, is when the prospect, after you've shared 2 or 3 times that the same information, is just not resonating. And that's okay, because we have people, myself included, we learn at different speeds, different capacities, and that's okay. The goal is, if we have to do it over and over in different forums, I even ask the question like, hey, Sally, apparently I'm not doing a good job on articulating, the solution here. How can we better approach this, right? Rest assured, we're able to do this. I just outlined this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how it could be better received. So I sometimes go back and ask the prospect, right? Why is it not being well received? Because I think that's the time when a AE or a salesperson gets a little bit worked up, is because they're under the mindset that, the prospect just isn't understanding. I've told them already once or twice.
They don't get it, Nadia. I told them. Oh, well, Nadia, we're coming up to the end of here, and I wish we can continue to go on, and maybe we need to bring you on again in the future to get some more wisdom from you. If there's one major piece of takeaway, one major piece of advice that you want folks listening to this episode to walk away when it comes to overcoming B2B objections, what's that one major piece of advice?
Listen, and ask a lot of open-ended questions, and questions that actually intrigue the buyer to think, right? If you're getting a yes person, usually you're going down the wrong track. So I would essentially say, listen and ask a lot of open-ended questions. That's going to help you really figure out if this is a real opportunity. And it's great when people have objections. It shows that they're engaged. So that would actually happen in your entire sales cycle, but those are the 2 things.
Love it. If folks were listening to this and they want to get a hold of you to learn more about Seismic, or just to connect with you in general, how did they go about doing so, Nadia?
On LinkedIn, it's Nadia Rashid, Rashid. You can reach me there. I'm pretty responsive. Seismic.com. If you're interested in learning more about the platform, we will certainly reach out.
Wonderful. Well, we thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today and for sharing your wisdom. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Donald.
Anytime. Listen, that was Nadia Rashid, and if you have not connected with her as well as yet, please go ahead and do so. You can find her link down below if you're watching this on TSC TV, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, click on the cover art and just go ahead and click on Nadia. Link, you'll get a chance to go back to her LinkedIn profile and connect with her. And also check out Seismic and some of the great things they're doing. It perhaps can help you and your team with some of their capabilities. Listen, as always, we want to make sure you're succeeding. This is Women History Month, and I want to make sure that you recognize and see some of these amazing women doing some awesome things in our sales, in the sales game and in the sales world. And all of these episodes you're hearing some of these remarkable things they're doing and taking advantage of. And I'm glad to see more women in sales. You heard my episode on how some of my best sales leaders were women leaders, and I'm not just saying that to just say it. It's the truth. You can listen to any of our episodes in the past, and I always talk about that. But I want you all to recognize some of those women in your life, and I want you to go ahead and connect with some of our guests from these episodes. You've heard some great ones like Melissa, Cynthia, and now you've heard Nadia. I want you to thrive. I want you to find more of those ideal customers. I want you to know what to say when you reach out to them. I want you to close more deals. I want you to take advantage of our sponsors. They're giving away some amazing deals as well, and the tools that they recommend are good. It's going to help you. I've used them, and I want you to test them out as well. Take advantage of those offers. But most importantly, each and every single day, I want to challenge you to raise your level of thinking. I want you to go out and do big things. Thank you so much for watching. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video today. If you enjoyed the content, I ask you to go ahead and hit that like button, that thumbs up at the bottom right-hand corner. Also, to make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. This way, we'll keep you up to date with all the latest sales strategies, latest tools, and things that are going to help you to not only find more prospects, but to close more deals. Thanks so much.